Engineers, according to the National Science Foundation data, represent less than 5% of total undergraduates.
Okay.
So 5% of the total undergraduate population turns into 33% of the top leaders in the business world.
Welcome to OwlSpeak, where we discuss what's going on at the Temple College of Engineering. I'm Casey Tinney, your stand-in host for today, who will let you in behind the scenes about Temple Engineering faculty and students. Our owls fly high, so we'll keep you up to date on their most interesting innovations. Today we're here with Dr. Tom Edwards. So, Dr. Edwards, what's your title and role here at the College of Engineering?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. I appreciate that. And I'm Tom Edwards. Title is professor, teaching professor, professor of practice, something like that. Also the chair of the Engineering, Technology, and Management Department. My role is that I started the Engineering Management Master's degree when I came here 9 years ago. And we've grown that into a department that's focused on the completely applied programs. I hate to say applied because that would imply that electrical and mechanical and civil are not applied, and obviously any engineering curriculum is applied. But the ones in my department, industrial and systems and engineering technology, are 100% applied. There's no research component to what we do.
Okay, understood. So I guess we'll jump right into the topic. We're here to talk about engineering as the start of a career in leadership. And I think when people think engineer, maybe if they don't have a lot of experience with it, they think someone in a lab or sitting at a desk doing drawings for a building. What do you mean when you say engineering as the start of a career in leadership? What does that kind of look like?
Okay, great question. And you're right. You're absolutely right that the perception of engineering is not necessarily related to growth into a leader. I certainly didn't understand that when I was a young person looking at engineering programs as an undergrad. But the reality is there was some data a couple of years ago on the number of CEOs of S&P 500 companies that were engineers. And it was on the order of 33%. So 33% of the CEOs of these S&P 500, the 500 largest publicly traded companies in the U.S., had an engineering background. As many had an engineering background as had an MBA background.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so pretty interesting. And it's even more interesting when you fold into that engineers, according to the National Science Foundation data, represent less than 5% of total undergraduates.
Okay.
So 5% of the total undergraduate population turns into 33% of the top leaders in the business world. There's a big connection from engineering to leadership, the study of engineering and to leadership. And why that is has never really been researched. So I can't point to literature, management literature. That's my background. I'm a management scholar. That's my doctorate. So you can't point to the literature. The speculation, and this comes from the previous director of not the current, but the previous director of the Harvard MBA program. I can't recall the gentleman's name. He was a chemical engineer. And his speculation was that as engineers, in professional practice, we learn very, very quickly that things have to work. The bridge can't fall down.
Yeah.
It absolutely has to work. And perhaps what's not as well known is that when something drastic like that happens, there will be a failure investigation, and how that mistake occurred will be uncovered. So there's a sense of accountability in the engineering profession, the professional practice of engineering, that's pretty significant, pretty harsh. So, and harsh is the wrong word. Hopefully it's not harsh, because usually the point of that failure investigation shouldn't be to fire someone, to blame someone. It should be what allowed the mistake to happen, what was wrong with the process that allowed that mistake to happen, and fix the process. So, trying to remember why I was going down that rabbit hole. So accountability. And the other aspect of that is you have to be efficient in the use of resources. If you over-design the bridge, you're going to lose the contract. You're not going to get the chance to win it, to build it. So you have to efficiently use all of the resources that it takes to accomplish a particular project, and I'm picking on bridges, but any engineering project, and it has to work. So this fellow who ran the Harvard Business School for a number of years, who was a chemical engineer, his speculation was that we learn that very early in our professional career as engineers, and when we get to leadership positions, we take that mindset with us, that whatever we build, whether it's a bridge, a piece of air pollution control equipment, a camera, or a company, has to work, and it has to be an efficient use of resources. Now, obviously, you can learn those same lessons through other professional paths besides engineering. In engineering, it's not optional. You are going to learn those lessons very early in your career, and that's probably the underappreciated role in developing engineers into societal leaders.
Okay, very interesting. So it's kind of like, it's not just the technical aspect, it's a lot of management early on in your career. You have to manage yourself and manage your technical skills, I guess.
Yes.
So I guess what are some things you're teaching students in the classroom that kind of prepare them for this? Because, engineering is such a technical field. What other skills are you teaching them to kind of get them ready to jump into this leadership immediately?
Sure, great question. Remember, the premise here is, I'll go back to my bridge example. The bridge can't fall down.
Yeah.
So teaching students the technology, the engineering, the mathematics, and the science, and the applied engineering is table stakes. You absolutely have to do that. And I think our faculty here does a terrific job with that. What I try to contribute is those things from my background in industry and my doctoral work in management on what does it look like to lead a team, right? It's one thing to be the individual contributor. Someone graduates from Temple University College of Engineering, they get a great job, and they're being the technical expert in whatever they're doing, whatever they've been educated to do. Life is good, right? And they're being successful. They're getting raises. They're getting promotions because they're good at this technical aspect of their job. And then eventually you get promoted to the point where you're responsible for other people.
Yeah.
Not just yourself. So this is a scary moment in someone's career trajectory, where all of a sudden you are accountable for what other people do. And you can't really control what other people do.
Yeah.
Right? You can't run around and micromanage people unless you have two people working for you. And if you're micromanaging them that closely, you're soon going to have no people working for you because they're going to quit, because they're not going to put up with this. They're going to go someplace else. So you have to get comfortable with this. And this is actually something that has been researched by Linda Hill at the Harvard Business School. The transition from an individual contributor role to this first leadership role is quite a change in your professional identity, your self-identity of who you are as a professional. So what I try to do is make students aware of this, that this is coming to them. I try to make them, understand that you're going to have opportunities in this career path beyond what your initial job is. As attractive as that first job is, that's really only the beginning. And if you think ahead and these challenges and get ready for these challenges, you're going to be in a better position. Awareness is key. I don't get a lot of opportunities to interact with undergrads. I get some in some senior design projects I've coached, and I do teach the course in engineering entrepreneurship. And I try to get students to understand, what happens in industry. When you've got a great idea, good, that's awesome. I'm glad you've got that great idea. Now, how do you turn that great idea into reality? And there's a part of the engineering process that goes above and beyond the technological part of it. And the first part of it, and this isn't my work, this is Abby Griffin from the University of Utah School of Business has done a study on what she calls serial innovators. So her research shows that it's a very small percentage of technical professionals, engineers and scientists, who are responsible for the overwhelming majority of innovations in existing companies. We're not talking about startups, but in existing established companies, very small, like under 1%.
Oh, wow.
Very, very small. of technical professionals are responsible for these innovations, and what differentiates them from the other 99%. They're all technically competent. That's table stakes. You have to have the technological competence. What she found the difference is that these serial innovators, as she calls them, they can go upstream of the technical work and identify problems that people care about. They can identify problems that customers really need to have solved. And then they have the technical ability to solve those problems. And then downstream, they have the ability to build the political support inside their company to invest in this idea. You know, because me having a great idea and doing a design in my spare time, that doesn't mean there's a product. You know, it has to. You have to be able to convince your organization to invest in this, to build prototypes, to do market testing, to do the technological testing of the product, depending on what the product looks like. So I try to, you know, and building these skills is difficult, right? This is building this design thinking skills, which is the first part of this, and then the political skills, which is the follow-on part of it. You know, you're not going to learn that in a classroom. You're going to learn that by going out and trying it and making mistakes and thinking about the mistakes and correcting your approach, and hopefully not only make mistakes but also have some successes and understand where those successes came from so that you can learn from them, and then you build your ability and your confidence as you go through that. So even though I can't teach stuff like this in a classroom, what I can do is teach awareness that this is, if you want to be this person, right? If you want to be this 1%, these are what you're going to have to do above and beyond the engineering skills that and I got to, you know, like I was an engineering student too, so I understand that these students are just so focused on doing this thing, earning this engineering degree, which is a pretty challenging degree to earn, that they don't really have time at this point in their career to develop these deep skills in design thinking or building political coalitions. But if they know they have to downstream, then after graduation, they have a party, declare success, you know, enjoy that first job, but then they also understand that this is only the beginning of their career and there's other skill sets they need to build to really be a game changer in their professional life and their career.
Kind of like a lifelong learning, people skills, communication, design thinking.
I'm still working on it. Yeah, absolutely.
Constant improvement.
Yes,
so I guess
absolutely.
You said you only interact with undergraduate students kind of in a limited capacity. You more focus on graduate students.
Right.
So I guess what's some advice or examples of things undergraduate students can do to start getting those skills, and what advice do you give to graduate students? Because like you said, they're in very different places in their career. So how does that advice differ?
The advice is a little bit similar in to both populations, to both groups. You know, these leadership skills, they're tough to practice, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a musician, there's a clear differentiation between practice and performance, right? When there's people out there who paid a ticket, then it's a performance. Anything besides that is practice. Well, how do you do that at your job? You know, I've never had a boss who told me, you know what, Tom, the financial results this quarter are just for practice. You know, they don't really count. You know, I mean, they always count. So we're challenged with practicing while we play. Okay, that would be the metaphor. So you got to look for these opportunities. Volunteers are a great opportunity. Volunteer for an organization, whatever your passion is. Volunteering in these organizations, especially youth sports or social goods. Excuse me. Whatever works for you. If you're willing to volunteer and say, "Hey, I'll project the project manage the big gala this year," if you're willing to step up and do that, there's people will give you that opportunity. And there's plenty of opportunities to do that, and you can learn those skills, in a way that doesn't put your career at risk. Now, I want a little caveat there. That doesn't mean to go out and be cavalier and make mistakes while you're working for a nonprofit, as in a volunteer position, because these folks do incredibly important work. So so I'm not advising that. I'm just advising that you may get that opportunity to lead things in some of these nonprofit volunteer aspects before you get the opportunity at the workplace. Now, in the workplace, just step up to the plate whenever you can, and sometimes you don't even ask permission. Sometimes you just you be a little careful here. Don't do anything that's going to get you fired. That's really bad advice. But think about okay, there's something that's not getting done, and you know that the organization wants it to get done, but it's like it's that thing that's important but doesn't really get in the budget every year. So the people that upper management think this is important, but it just keeps getting pushed out. Well, make that your issue, and grab that. So that's one thing you can do. The other thing you can do, I'm going to get a little geeky here. So this goes to some of the management literature on power, right? Because I said, part of what you have to do is learn to build a political coalition, which is an exercise of power inside the organization. Power being the ability to mobilize resources, budgets, people to get things done. Okay, so a very positive view of the word power, which can have some negative connotations as well. So we're looking at it very positively. Get good stuff done. Okay, so French and Raven wrote a great paper that no one has improved upon since they published this paper in 1959, which is a really long time ago. The sources of social power. How do people get the ability to drive these outcomes? And they identified 5 sources of social power, and 3 of them have to do with your position, right? Legitimate power means everybody sees you as the boss because you are the boss, so you have the right to tell people what to do. And then coercion and reward power. I can fire you if you don't do what I want, or I can give you a raise if you do what I want. All of these come with the position, right? You have to get the promotion before you can even start to implement these. The other 2 is where we can make use of these early in our career, right? One is referent power, and the other is expert power. So referent power is when people look at you as being a good citizen, a good member of the organization. You're somebody that doesn't look out just for themselves, but you look out for your coworkers and the mission of the organization, so people identify with you. And that gives you some ability to influence people. And the 5th is expert. If you have expertise in a certain area, people will defer to you because you're the expert. So the legitimate power, you have to wait to get the promotion. You don't have that. If you walk around trying to exercise, coercive power when you're not the boss, you're going to look really foolish, and you're going to alienate people. It's not going to be a good outcome. Expert power, you need no one's permission to develop that. Any one of us sitting at this table could walk away from this table and start developing expert power on some issue just like that, with absolutely no one's permission. Just do it. Start studying, start reading about it, whatever it is. So that is one way that people, new graduates, can start building power right away. Now, my graduate students, some of them are a little bit more advanced in their career. So they've been roughed up a little bit. They've had some, projects that didn't go well, and they've had some projects that did go well. I mean, you're never going to bat 1,000 on these things, right? So then now it's for them. It's more about starting to develop the real nuts and bolts skills. How do you motivate people? Think of what I said. 15, 20 minutes ago. That when you get that promotion, you're going to be accountable for people you can't control. That's kind of scary, especially the first time that you stand in front of the room and say that to a team. Follow me, guys. I know the way. You're going to be accountable for that. So that's a pretty scary thing. So there's a number of things you can do, a number of skills you can add to that. And first of all is make sure you have the right vision. So there's this great work by John Kotter about how leadership interacts with management, and how you start with a vision, where you want the organization to be. And then, a lot of people do that. If you Google, organizational vision right now, you're going to get a gazillion hits, right? Great, everybody has a vision. The next step, what's the plan? What's the budget? How do I really do this? How do I make this vision come true? And if you don't do that part, yeah, it's not really a vision. It's more of an hallucination, right? So, I mean, you really got to now you're into the nuts and bolts of how to do it. So we talk about that in the graduate program. And then, okay, great, now you've got the vision and you got the plan. Now you got to ask people to do things. And you got to ask them to do the right things, right? So this is about delegation. How do you delegate? And the delegation is one of these things that sounds really easy until you do it. I was that way. When I first got in this position where I could delegate to people, my attitude was, well, geez, it's got to be easier than doing it myself. So I'm just telling people what to do. How hard can that be? Until you tell somebody what to do, and they go off and do it, and it wasn't exactly what you needed. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, wait a minute, who's at fault here? Is this person hearing wrong? Am I giving them the direction wrong? So delegation is a skill. Once you delegate, now you got to follow up. That's another part of this whole Kotter thing about now you got the vision and the plan, and you get people engaged with it. Well, now you got to measure it, make sure it's really happening. What happens when it doesn't? What happens when you delegate to someone? Someone delegates to me, Tom, go do this thing, and I drop the ball. I don't do it for whatever reason. So this is now someone has to hold me accountable, and this is really tricky. It's really easy to bang on the table and yell at somebody that they didn't do what you wanted them to do, and I've tried that early in my career, and I got to tell you, it blew up in my face. It did not work well at all. And so so the trick in accountability is holding people accountable for work results in a way that does not demotivate them, in a way that empowers them to not only do what you need to do, but to be more bought in to this vision for the organization that you've come up with, right? And that's kind of the tricky part of this. Because if people aren't bought in, if it's just me walking around pushing everybody all the time, first of all, it's going to get exhausting, and I'm not going to be as successful. If people are bought into the vision and they're motivated and they're going off and making things happen that I don't even know that they're doing, but it's in alignment with the vision, that's a win, right? That's a great day. That's how you make a successful organization. But that comes back to this: I've got to be able to hold people accountable in a way that doesn't alienate them. All right, so this is difficult. So and the literature, the management literature, the research literature doesn't help us too much.
Yeah.
And this is some of the holes in management literature. Is I can cite literature that says, if you have too harsh of an accountability approach, it's going to have bad organizational outcomes. But you have to hold people accountable. How do I do that? And this is where the management literature sometimes fails, and it certainly fails us in this aspect of, well, how do you do this? So then we talk about some practitioners who have written, they're not management scholars, they're practitioners who have written ways to do this. And we talk about it. The other thing that we do with the graduate students is all of these concepts. You can't walk away from talking about these management skills keeping it too theoretical, right? I mean, my students do not sign up for the engineering management program because they want to publish papers in management journals.
Yeah.
They're running organizations. They're running teams, and they're running organizations, or they want to. So the practical application of these theories is critical. So one of the things we do, I'm not a fan of case stories that are in the back of the textbook and they're published by this place or that place. I don't want to be too harsh about that, but that doesn't work for me. So what I ask students to do, my graduate students in the first course, is I want you to write up something that you really lived through. Okay, some organizational thing that went sideways that you either witnessed firsthand or you were personally involved with. And through the semester, so they write that up as a problem statement, and through the semester, every one of these concepts we've talked about, the vision and the plan and the delegating and the accountability and another 12 weeks worth of stuff, apply that concept to this thing that you lived through and see if you can explain it. Can you explain the outcome based on this concept, French and Raven's sources of social power. Excuse me. Can you explain it? And so not everything's applicable, right? I mean, you got to know that, okay, this doesn't fit, right? This is a hammer and I need a screwdriver. So I'm not going to try to, use every tool I have. But this gives students a couple things. It gives them practice in determining what tool to use to a specific issue. It gives them the broad opportunity to make these theoretical concepts practical by looking at something that they know is real because they lived through it. So they feel down in their gut, yeah, you know what? French and Raven really does explain what went wrong here, or at least a piece of what went wrong. If I had known this before, or if the boss had known this, he or she could have done something differently. I could have done something differently and perhaps had a different outcome. So what I'm trying to give my students is this, that there's a body of theoretical literature out there that, if we work at it, can be applied practically so that they get a toolkit. And actually, this is one of the assignments. They have to write a toolkit. We identify the 8 challenges of every leader, and then they got to develop a toolkit on how they're going to address each one of these things. I'll just pick one. One is exerting influence when you don't have formal authority. How do you do that?
Yeah.
You can't just say, well, it's not my job. I don't have the power, so I can't do it. One of the secrets of career progress is that you're going to be responsible for things before you have the power to actually do it.
Oh yeah. You gotta do the work before you get the promotion.
Absolutely,
always.
Absolutely. So you need to figure this out. So I have heard back from students, several years later, saying, hey, I've still that toolkit, I've still got that, on my computer screen, or I've got it taped up to the, the wall in my cubicle. I hear back from students that I had the first year I was here 9 years ago. I hear from them and say, hey, I ran into this problem. I tried to apply so-and-so. It ain't working. What do you think? And we'll brainstorm back and forth and try to figure out, what is applicable to some very, very specific problems. So the graduate students are in a different spot, right? They've already started their career. Some of them have already attained some leadership position, even if it's leadership of a team or a program, and they need these more formalized, specific skills to be more effective and to make their next jump, their next career jump.
Got it. So I think for undergraduate students and anyone who hasn't worked in a corporate situation, you hear engineers are more likely to be CEOs. And I think they're thinking, well, how do I get from entry-level mechanical engineer to CEO? How do you get from mechanical engineer to CEO? What does that path kind of look like? Because you talked about, volunteering to get these skills and, exercising that power at work. But what does the path look like from entry-level to CEO? What are the positions in between that they should be looking to hit?
What a great question. Okay, so what the path does not look like, linear and flawless.
Not a straight line.
It's not a straight line.
Got it.
It is twisting. It is a twisting and turning road. There's going to be setbacks. If you're the person, the engineer who's putting themselves out there and taking risks, guess what? Sometimes you're going to fail, and you got to get over that. You got to recover from it. So it's very rarely going to be a straight line. I look back on my career, and I probably don't even want to say the number of years, but yeah, I think I had probably 30 years of industrial experience before I came to Temple full-time as a prof. And that went from entry-level engineer, actually it went from draftsman.
Okay.
While I was still trying to get my undergraduate degree, and then entry-level engineer, and then not quite CEO, but I was general manager of one of our divisions.
Okay.
Publicly traded company. So some of the things along the way, I mean, one really critical thing that I did right, almost accidentally, is something that's called effective followership. I was faced with a problem. We had a test failure at a vendor, which meant that we could not, it was a lot acceptance test, so this representative thing is tested, and then you accept the whole lot. Well, this thing failed. And so we couldn't accept that lot of components, which meant we couldn't bolt them into our product, which meant we couldn't sell it to the customer, which means we weren't going to make our revenues that quarter.
Not good.
Not good, yeah. I'm just an engineer. I have no idea what not making revenues in the quarter means.
Yeah.
But this was Jack Welch's GE back in the 90s, and not making your quarterly commitments to Jack Welch was apparently a bad thing. Based on watching my management running around, scrambling, trying to figure out how they were going to fix this problem. Now, no one was blaming me. You know, it wasn't my fault the thing failed. No one was even implying that it was my fault. But I'm watching everybody scramble around trying to plug this hole in the sales. And I'm thinking, well, why are they giving up on this, getting a retest done? You know, let's look at this. And I called the vendor up, and I said, okay, this is the deal. I want to accept this, but we have to come together with a plan on how we're going to do the failure analysis, figure out what the root cause is, put any corrective action in place, and retest, and still make this deadline so that we can get it shipped on time. And the vendor was great. They were on board, and we put a plan together on, you know, day by day. And I actually took a desk calendar, you know, these old-fashioned desk calendars that have the big squares in them. And I, you know, every day, this is what we have to do to make this happen. And I took it to my boss. And he took it to the program manager. And they looked at it and they said, well, you know, okay, kid, what do you need to make this happen? And I said, I just, you know, I need some travel budget, that's all. You know, the vendor's doing all the work. All I need is to be able to go there when they need me. And they said, yeah, I gotta try it, you know. And of course their attitude was, what could it hurt, you know?
Yeah.
We'll still do all the grown-up stuff to bring sales in, but if Tom wants to go, you know, take a shot at this, knock yourself out. And we did it. We pulled it in. And we were able to get our product in time to support the quarterly sales. So, and then later I read the paper, much later I read the paper about effective followership, and that's what I realized what I had done. So an effective follower is someone who looks around at the organization, sees things that need to be done, whether they're expected to do them or not, and figures out how to do it.
So kind of seizing an opportunity for leadership
Yes.
before you've even been given it.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
Right. Now there's a caveat here. The gentleman who wrote this paper about effective followership, from his research, he concluded that although every manager in corporate America will say they want effective followers, many do not. They feel threatened by it. And this is an astounding number. 50% of the time, effective followers who do things like I just described suffer negative career consequences.
Interesting.
That's
okay.
a horrible
Yeah.
comment on the state of management in American companies. So this is a caveat to be aware. Be aware of how your organization works, what the politics are in your organization. Don't be naive about that and put yourself at risk. Be able to manage the politics of these things so that you can be successful without, I know I've said politics a couple times. This doesn't mean you have to be a politician. It doesn't mean you have to, read Machiavelli, although my graduate students do read Machiavelli. But you have to be aware so that you don't walk into a problem that you did not need to.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it comes down to the politics and the communication,
Right.
the combination you talked about earlier.
So I mean, that's one way you get promotion, right? Is you be an effective follower, and after that, you got to deliver results. It's you have to deliver, under promise and over deliver. But I think the other thing, and this does not get enough attention, is the role of trust. If people don't trust you, that's a huge problem. If you're a team leader and your people don't trust you, they're not going to take risks for you. And again, you're accountable for the work of other people. You're accountable for things you can't control. And you need them bought in, 100% committed, taking risks for you. And if they don't trust you, they're not going to do that. So, and then your management has to trust you, right? I remember there was, when I was general manager, somebody on my staff, it was a typical situation where, another division missed the shipment, so the sales were going to look bad, and this was the whole Wall Street thing. We got measured on quarterly sales, and the CEO was asking me to move a shipment that was supposed to be next quarter into this quarter. So we're scrambling around trying to make this happen, and it's people putting in a bunch of extra hours trying to help out. And one of my staff said, Tom, why don't you just don't promise? Basically he was asking me, why don't you just sandbag the deliveries? If you think something's going to be delivered in this quarter, tell the boss next quarter. And then when they come around and ask you to pull something in, and they always do, then it's no pain and strain. And I thought about that, and I said, well, you know what? That sounds really smart until the first time somebody figures out I've done that.
Yeah.
And then they will not trust anything I say again. And everything I do in this company to try to help the company and try to help the people in my division is dependent on people trusting me. And I'm not going to put that at risk just so that, I have an easier life in terms of deliveries. Guy actually said, why are you being a Boy Scout? That's actually what he said to me. He said, stop being a Boy Scout, Tom.
Man.
And I said, I'm not being a Boy Scout. I need to be trusted. Okay? And so trust is one of these things that's really important. This is one of the things we talk about in my graduate program. And there's actually, of course, there's a theory of trust, the Shorman, Mayer, and Gavin model of trust, which is got like 12,000 citations in the management literature. So it's enormously influential. And their antecedents of trust, that's a big academic word that means what are the foundations of trust, are ability, integrity, and benevolence. So people have to believe that you know what you're talking about. Right? You got to be right, okay? Or people won't trust you. Integrity. Say what you mean what you say, tell the truth. Don't sandbag the boss on when deliveries can be made, because that destroys integrity and that destroys trust. And benevolence in this context means that I'm not in it just for me. I am in it for the team. I am in it to get the best outcomes for the company and for the people that are in my team. So these are the things that we talk about in the graduate program is, how useful is trust to your career? And now you got the tools. Now you know what you have to do. You got to know what you're talking about. You got to tell the truth, and you got to be in it for everybody and not just yourself. And if somebody ever tells you stop being a Boy Scout, ignore them.
Yeah.
Be the Boy Scout.
Man. So, you gave a lot of great advice for both people mid-level in career and undergraduates getting started. I guess, do you have any last parting words of wisdom or things you want to make sure people hear?
Sure. I think probably the takeaway is, or one of the takeaways is, okay, just because there's this big leverage from engineering to leadership positions, doesn't mean everybody wants to take that path.
Yeah.
Okay. So leadership is hard, right? You're accountable for things you can't control. That makes life tough to begin with.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest thing. It's relentless. Every problem comes to you, unless all the hard problems come to you. Otherwise, it gets solved before it gets to you. That's okay. So why would you do this to yourself, right? And I pose this question to my graduate students in the first course. First, I make them talk about firing people. I said, have you ever fired anybody? Have you ever thought about it? What's it like to fire somebody, right? Because this is part of what you're signing up for in a leadership position. Right, your responsibility is to the team, and if somebody's presence is hurting the team, it's your job to separate them from the organization, and that's a terrible thing to do.
Yeah,
it's terrible. I got to tell you, my wife will tell you this. She'll back me up on this. It's the only thing that keeps me up at night when I have to fire somebody the next day. Okay, so we have that discussion. What's it like to fire somebody? And then I ask them the question: well, why do you want to do this thing? Why do you want to raise your hand and sign up for this job where you're accountable for things you can't control? You're going to have to do horrible things like fire people. You're going to get blamed for stuff that's not your fault. Why do you want to do this? And the answer for me is that in a leadership position, I can accomplish things that I could never accomplish as an individual contributor. Okay, so one of my first jobs as chief engineer was developing and building a guided projectile to be shot out of a gun on a Navy ship to defend it against incoming missiles.
Wow. Okay.
So, and the experts that I had on this team, because the radar experts and fire control software and the mechanical engineers who could design this thing that's going to be shot with 30,000 Gs, I was not an expert in these things. I mean, super heterodyne radio receiver. I'm not sure I could spell that, let alone be the technical expert. But when you learn these skills and you learn how to get people to work together, I could accomplish this thing. It worked, and we got it done. And I could have never done that as an individual contributor. So that's the reason. That's why people who aspire to leadership, if they're aspiring for good reasons, because there's bad reasons as well, but if you're aspiring for socially positive reasons, it's because your efforts will get the opportunity to impact the world far beyond what you could as an individual contributor, okay? And if that's appealing to you, then you're going to take the risk, you're going to do the extra work, you're going to, take the setbacks, because I've only talked about my successes in this podcast. I haven't talked about getting demoted because things went bad on my shift, which happened to me. And, and you recover from it, you get back up and you just start working.
You did mention the path was windy. It wasn't straight.
The path was windy. I'm only talking about the success stories here.
Yeah.
We don't have enough time. If we had another additional hour, we could talk about the times I failed and had to pick myself up off the ground and get started again. But they're not as much fun to talk about.
No, they're certainly not.
But that would be my takeaway. And people who haven't made the college decision yet, if leadership is something that motivates them, they may not have thought about engineering as a career path, because I never understood this when I was 17-year-old making a college decision. I wanted to be an astronaut. Now astronauts went to engineering school, so I went to engineering school. It was that simple. I didn't have that much insight into it. But if you think you want to be a leader, engineering is a path. Remember, you're 5% of undergraduate. Pretty elite group.
Yeah.
And that 5% turns into 33% of CEOs. There's no data on other societal leaders, government or nonprofits, but there is data on the S&P 500. So that's that probably be my final word here.
Parting words of wisdom.
Parting words. I don't know if it's wisdom or not, but parting words.
There we go. Well, thank you, Dr. Edwards, for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Maybe we'll schedule that follow-up failure podcast. We'll bring a couple other people on. But
I'd love to do that. That would be awesome. That would be terrific.
well, thanks for joining us,
Thank
and
you.
tune in next time.